Hi everyone, so now we're going into another Arcane deep dive, this time with Mel versus Silco, and why did they give it all up? Now both of these characters were given some just wonderful choices on a platter, and they had to make a specific decision. Now what's interesting is the moment they made these decisions were off camera, and sometimes you kind of have to do a little bit of thinking about what actually happened. But both of these like really strong character moments are kind of set up. In fact, there are lots of parallels between Silco and Mel, but it's something that you would not notice immediately. What most people tend to do is they tend to make parallels between Silco and Vander, because after all, Vander was the person who was in charge of the lanes. He's the father of Vi. He is the guy who worked with Grayson. So you look at the parallels between that and the fact that Silco in charge of the Undercity. He's a father figure to Jinx. He has a relationship with Marcus. There are lots of parallels there of how good or how bad either of these characters do those types of things. Hmm. Okay, so that makes sense. It's very easy. It's very clear from the series. But when you actually dig a little bit, you also kind of notice that the series is also putting parallels between Mel and Silco. So if we actually look at this, it's actually fairly straightforward. So Mel is probably the most consummate operator in Piltover. And when we first see her, we see her as this person who is the richest person in Piltover. We see her complain that she's the poorest of the Modernas, so you have an idea that she is kind of like one of those people who's more concerned about status. You also see her manipulating the various council members. I mean, she knows how to actually push people's buttons here and there. As you go through the series, you wonder if she's doing this for her own political gain. I mean, she doesn't deliberately push out Heimerdinger. She pushes Jace to push out Heimerdinger, and maybe she was a little concerned that actually would go the way she wanted it. But you get the idea that not everything she does is just because she loves Jace or whatever. It just there's always that kind of thing hanging out in the background. Is like, is this because she cares for him, or is this because she wants something else? It's you can actually kind of look at it in various ways. Now, in the end, it looks like it's more like definitely a team situation, but at the beginning, not so much. So the beginning kind of image of her is the Machiavellian politician type person. Now the same kind of goes on with Silco. So Silco pretty much starts off as kind of James Bond-esque villain slash mafia character. Here is the guy that he's in his under water base with the evil doctor and Shimmer that turns a rat into this monster, turns this other person into this kind of mutant type thing, and he sets the situation up where he's going to kill Vander and the kids, and he does a whole bunch of stuff that just are completely villainous. I mean, other people say that Silco is not a villain, he's an antagonist, but you have to look at like the first 3 episodes. It's like pretty much villain here up until like the very end, and then after that things change a little bit. But both of these characters are pretty much set up as kind of villain-like characters. And as the series goes on, there are changes or they're given extra layers where other people could look at and say, these are not such bad people after all. And what's also interesting is towards the end, both of these characters are given really hard choices to make. So, in the case of Mel, her mother comes. Her mother pretty much says that, her brother has died, things are bad, I need you back. And Mel is, of course, upset with her mother because, she was exiled. And, that would pretty much, screw you over as well. I mean, like, mentally here, it's like, why am I exiled? Why did you, like, forsake me? situation here. And but Mel's mother pretty much said, "You made me weak." I was like, "Whoa." I thought that I wasn't enough. So almost up until this time, all Mel was working for was to put Piltover on the map, to increase her political power, and make Piltover bigger so that she could pretty much say to her mother, "Look, I've done all this. I'm not like, some of the poorest of the Minoras. I'm not like some pipsqueak here. I can really do stuff." Well, so there may have some of that been going on unconsciously. So you have that. And her mother pretty much like, "You can come back. You can come back. You can be my right hand man. Everything we can be cool with each other, and you can do what you want, and everything will be hunky dory." Now imagine if you were given that choice. It's like you were estranged from your parents. You have a chance to get back together again, to have everything as it was before you were exiled. Plus, your mom admits it wasn't because that you weren't good enough or that she didn't like you or anything. It was none of that. It was that she herself felt she was kind of weak and she needed to make tough decisions, but just could not make the tough decisions with you having some disapproval of that. So that would be kind of a shocking thing to hear, and you might think of it that would be, well, maybe I should go back. I mean, there was always that possibility. But what ended up happening is that Mel decided no. She took off her ring. Now, if you notice that ring there is the symbol of the house. Now, you actually have to put two and two together here because Mel got a letter with that same insignia on it. So he's like, okay, that's probably from her mother, and that's probably the insignia of the House of Medardas. Though, I mean, it's never explicitly stated anywhere in Arcane. It's like you see the symbol in the opening, you see this symbol in various places, but there's no like sign that says this is the symbol of Medarda. No one ever says that, but no one ever really would because it's like you should know it, kind of thing. And by doing that, basically she's basically saying, look, I've had it with the House of Moderna. I don't want part of it. I'm on Piltover's side, and that's where I want to be. Now, when you look at that, it's like, was this a real hard choice to make? And from Mel's perspective, it probably wasn't as much. Mel's did not want to do violent, just go in that particular way. What she wanted initially was basically to go the diplomatic route. Not the way of the wolf, but the way of the fox, as kind of Mel's mother kind of mentions it. And in so, it's not like a huge conflict of values in this case. Like her values were with Piltover, her values were with making peace, her values, of course, were in that direction. There was like maybe a slight tug there, but it probably wasn't a huge, big of a deal for her. But still, from a perspective, she could have had a lot more power, a lot more wealth. She could have been in good graces with her mother. Everything could have been reconciled and all that. And things could have been fine. I mean, they could have been very bad for, the Undercity because, what would have happening was that Piltover would have had to use their weapons on the Undercity. There would be no peace. They'd be wiped out. And of course, then her mother would have those weapons, and who knows what would happen after that, which we might not be able to avoid anyway. But yeah, there's that aspect. Now, looking at in this case Silco, well, what happened to Silco? So Jace basically gives Silco almost everything he wanted. Silco wanted access to the Hex Gates. He wanted amnesty. He wanted sovereignty. I mean, these are the things that he had basically been fighting for. The independent nation of Zon. This was something that, from episode 3 all the way up into everything that's been building up would be to create enough power that he could separate from topside. And just say, sure, okay, just kind of reduce, the manufacturing of Shimmer. Not in that. That's fine. I mean, like all all Silco wanted was use Shimmer as a leverage for separation. Whatever. You know, turn back the crystal? That's fine. Because again, that's all he wanted to use the crystal as leverage. No problem. Give Jinx back. That's not what he wanted to do. Jinx was, of course, a daughter to him. So then you're getting to the situation of what do you do? And this was a huge issue for Silco. He had the idea of an independent nation is on or his family. Now this is kind of a bigger choice between, in the case of Mel, which is Piltover or the House of Maderno, which is it going to be? People. But again, they're parallels, which I thought were kind of interesting. In the case of Silco, you see that he chooses family over the independent nation of Zon. And what ends up happening in the case of Mel is you actually see her choose Piltover instead of family. These are both different things. So again, these kind of parallels, so to speak, are very interesting. Now, the last thing is of course, in the case of Mel, all our decisions are aligned with her values. In the case of Silco, you're not really sure exactly what thing he values the most, because up until this point, the independent nation is on has been his highest value, so to speak. Everything else, it doesn't matter. Like, he doesn't even choose, what method to use. If it's shimmer, it's okay. If it's a huge weapon that's used by Hextech, it's okay. If a whole bunch of people die, it's okay. He doesn't care. He doesn't care that he is like the top guy of a organized criminal organization. He doesn't care that he has to use intimidation and all kinds of tactics. It's like, as long as that works to create an independent zone, it doesn't matter. But then he's forced with the idea of, okay, what about giving up your daughter? Are you willing to do that? And it's like, it's really interesting because Jinx isn't exactly like flesh and blood. He he basically adopted her. So that kind of leaves you the question of, why couldn't he sacrifice Jinx? And there are like all kinds of reasons for that. And one of them maybe explanation is that Jinx is kind of a symbol of the chaos of Zon. How Zon in and of itself is perfect. You can also, of course, see that Jinx is in a certain extent kindred spirits to Silco. There are very interesting parallels between, I guess you could say, the way both of those people think to a certain extent. So, given all that, you see two characters who have faced similar tough choices and made different decisions, and both of these characters have very interesting parallels that not everyone notice. But again, that's just kind of one great thing about Arcane is, I think a lot of these parallels are deliberate. This is one of the not so obvious ones, but probably deliberate because just the way the spacing of the events that happened in the beginning and the end of Arcane. Okay, so that has been a deep dive, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.